This is Ian and he's the skipper for Wherry Maud today.
Right, we were talking about the development of wherry. Now wherries really came from the development of the, if you go back far enough, to the Norse trading vessels, which were clinker built. They were then developed into keels which had a square rig sail. There were two types in this area. You have the Norfolk keels, which just had a large single sail, square sail, and you had the Humber keels, which had a main square sail and a topsail. Then in the 1700s, with the Huguenots coming across from the Netherlands, they had already developed a fore and aft rig. And it didn't take very long before the boat builders in Norfolk and Suffolk to take up the idea of fore and aft rig. And then the wherries were developed. Now the difference between a wherry and a keel is, in a keel, most of the main strength bracing is in the centre of the hull, which is here. Where on a wherry you have two main beams, one where the tabernacle is up there, and one where this bulkhead is here, where the covert is. And then you've got the whole hold, which is completely open.
Yep.
So you could get in 40-foot lengths of whatever into the hold. They were a far more efficient rig for going towards windward, although they're not brilliant because it's not a balanced rig. So eventually most of the trading vessels on the Norfolk and Suffolk Broads went over to being wherries. But the keels were still going right up into the late 1800s. And then by the time that the trains and eventually lorries with the First World War, the trade for wherries very rapidly disappeared.
Right.
At the last few periods, from about the 1900s onwards, the Edwardians tended to use them as holidays, and the wherries were converted from trading in the winter to holiday traffic in the summer.
What was their main cargo?
Cargoes for wherries in the 1800s onwards, you have to think back that the only other form of transport was wagons.
Right.
And most of the wagons you were looking at a ton and a quarter over very rough, very poorly made roads. It's rather like the potteries. I mean, at one time they used to use wagons for transferring or transporting the pottery stuff, but there was so much breakage that eventually they realised they could get maybe 40 tons on a barge.
40 tons.
And that's the same with the wherries. Northern river wherries were typically from 12 to about 35 tons capacity.
And some of these wherries were sailed by one man and one boy, weren't they? Or sometimes
no,
just
I think
or
you'd probably find two.
Is that a myth?
Sometimes a man and a wife would do it. Unlike a canal barge, they didn't truly live on the wherries. Their homes were either in Norwich or they would be in Yarmouth, and the families tended to be in those locations. The wherrymen would be out for 5 days maybe at a time.
Right.
A lot of the wherries were owned by companies or individuals, but not always the skipper owned the wherry. Very few skippers actually.
Did they sail on the sea as well? Or?
They could go to sea because they were used as lighters. So if you get a cargo vessel coming into Yarmouth and it needed to lighten its load to get upriver, then the wherry would go out to sea. They used to put side shrouds on those occasions to take the whip out of the mast.
Right.
But they would go out into Yarmouth roads and would be used for.
And they raced as well, I believe.
Yes, they were mainly raced on inland waters, mainly Braden Water or Barton Broad were two common places.
And you were explaining to me the difference between Wherry Maud and Wherry Albion earlier.
Well, Wherry Maud was built in 1899, built down at Reedham. And she is clinker built, a traditional form of boat building for this type of vessel. Now Albion was built a year earlier down at Lake Lothing, and it was built by somebody that really gone over to Carvel building, where the planks butt up to one another, and he was doing a lot of work for fishing boats, and we suspect that that's why he persuaded Walkers, who Albion was purchased by, that they should go over to Carvel built.
Right.
Construction. Walkers also used to run their wherries up to Bungay and were taking oats and things like this for the brewing industry. You have to go through Gelderson Lock, which is a stepped brick lock.
Yeah.
So lands of a wherry wouldn't have liked riding up on those
Right.
very much. So there were advantages in going to Carvel for Albion.
And how are they different to you know?
Handling shouldn't be greatly
Handle.
different because, you know, the mast is very similar, the same position, the hull profile is quite similar. Maud has a reputed cargo capacity of about 45 tonnes max, and Albion is about 40 tonnes.
Right. And
Maud is slightly wider and slightly longer than Albion, but if they were completely loaded up to their original capacity, you're probably looking at a vessel that's over 60 tonnes.
Wow. And
They'd be loaded right down to the walkways were almost in the water.
There's been a lot of ballast put in recently, hasn't there, to improve it?
Yes, both of them carry. Albion carries about 11 tonnes of ballast.
To improve the way.
No, it's for two reasons. One is, yes, to help its sailing, but secondly, the boats are designed. The hull is designed for a cargo.
Right.
Now, for 30 years, Albion didn't have any cargo in it. All the buoyancy is in the centre of the boat. We've got heavy weight with the mast at the bow and a heavy weight with the rudder on the stern. And the boats were becoming hogged, where all the buoyancy is lifting the centre up and causing it then to completely lose its shape. So about 14-15 years ago, Albion went up onto the slip. They cut out the wooden keel and put in a steel keel, a steel I-beam, and set her back on that.
Right.
So to give her back the shape that she would originally have had. So now we keep ballast in both boats, basically to try keeping the whole shape and to help with the sailing.
Last question, Ian. So we're in the process of raising money for a new tender. Can you just explain what a tender is, why we need it? And
well, the tender is this little vessel here, and we need it because today, I mean, at one time, yes, it would have been acceptable to spend maybe 5 days on a trip. Today it isn't. People want to go out for a day and want to go somewhere. In the past times, there have been occasions when Maud and Albion would have set out from Womack and would have got no further than a little way down here all day by pointing with light winds. Nowadays we can get up to Ranworth and back with the use of the tender pushing us.
Right. Okay.
And plus, if you want to put people ashore, if there's an emergency, you really do need a tender.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.